are in a relationship series right now. So you are becoming something. What happened to you has shaped you and molded you into who you are. The decisions you have made have brought you to the current moment in time that you are in right now. And the thing that shapes most of us, most of all, is not really our decisions, but really our relationships. Your relationships determine so much about you. There's a famous saying that, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. That does not stand true, because if you looked at my friends in high school, they were really successful, and now they're not successful, and I'm really successful. So that did not pan out well. I'm really humble about it. But the good, bad, and everything in between, we wouldn't be where we are at if it wasn't for the relationships that have brought us to this moment. Whether you had good parents or bad parents, they have shaped you and molded you into who you are. Your friends growing up have shaped you and molded you into who you are. And so we believe that relationships shape us and mold us. And so that's why we are doing the relationship series, is because we think that this will shape you and mold you most of all. And so kind of recap, we'll kind of, at the tail end, we have one more message left in this series, and then we are going to do a big Q&A night. But week one was all about our relationship with God. And so we're kind of operating this whole series off of love God, love people. If you don't get your relationship with God right, every other relationship is going to fall apart. So week one was all, hey, look at your relationship with God. What's your relationship with God like? Do you see God as an angry God? Do you see him as a loving God? You got to have a proper understanding of who God is. Week two was knocked out of the park by Danae. She talked all about what it's like being a Christian single, and how the end all be all of Christianity is not to get married and have the white picket fence and everything like that, and how to find someone and what to look for when you are single and wanting to put yourself out there, especially as a female. It's really easy for us dudes when you're single. How do you put yourself out there? Ask a girl out, okay? It's simple, guys. I did it. I can be the case study in that. It works. You just ask her out, and the trick is you have her best friend as an inside rat to tell you information. Sorry, Kara, did not mean to throw you under the bus right there. Did not mean to call you out by name or anything like that. But then she's like, no, she's into you. Keep asking her out. And you're like, okay, cool. And now we're 2 babies deep. So, all right. Then week three was, we talked all about sex. We're talking about sex, baby. We're talking about you and me. We're talking about all the good things and all the bad things that may be. You guys, how good was that, man? Shout out to YouTube, dude. We're coming for you, Mr. Beast. So we talked about sex, and basically a cultural moment. Everybody loves to talk about sex and nuance sex and what is sex and what isn't sexuality and everything. And so our goal with that talk was just cut through the noise, be really clear about what sex is and what sex isn't from a biblical perspective, because the Bible is really clear about that. And then last week we talked about friendships, how to make friends, and why they end. And so this week, we are talking about all about best friends, boundaries, and breakups. So the 3 B's: best friends, boundaries, and breakups. And I pitched it to my buddy Nick, and he was like, dude, this sounds like a book series. I'm like, it's coming, dude. I'm going to write a book about best friends, boundaries, and breakups, and I'm going to become the sellout megachurch pastor who just turns every sermon into a book. And actually, I'll have an intern write the book. That's what I'll do, because that's what those guys do. Okay, sorry, that's my rant about megachurch pastors. Okay, one of my big pet peeves, other than megachurch pastors, is, I don't know if you guys have seen this on the internet. How many of you guys are on Instagram? Show of hands. Some of you guys are on Instagram. Some of you guys are not sinners, so you're not on Instagram. So I see this all the time, especially with birthdays. It's the person who posts, not going to name the sex in particular, but it's the person who posts on their birthday, and all of a sudden it's like, I had no idea that they had 20 best friends. It's just particularly girls, that it's like, I had no idea, I could not address the elephant in the room. I had to do it. I didn't know that every single one of your friends was your best friend. And I'm like, I don't know, for me, I'm like, I don't know, I'm a little more sacred with my wording. I'm like, I don't just, if you're my friend, you're my friend, but if you're my best friend, that's kind of that's 4 or 5 people. That's not 20 people. And so, part of me, I don't know why, but Mary can be my witness to this. Every time I see that on Instagram, I go off and rant, and she's like, babe, you've done this rant 20 times, okay? You gotta let it die. But it's something near and dear to my heart, because I think it's devaluing what the best friend status is. And I work really hard at being people's best friends. And so when they label me their best friend on Instagram, it means a lot to me. But then when I see the post come after that, I'm like, wait, hang on, Isaac's their best friend too? Nick's their best friend. I thought I was their best friend. And it's the whole like head game thing. And so I want to get back to the sacredness of best friends. And so if you want to know who someone is, you look at the friendship and you look at how long the friendships have lasted. Do the friendships last years or decades or just a couple of months? Do they have friends? Do they tend to discard friends after several years, or do all their friendships end in disasters? And we don't just want to look at other people's friendships when we're thinking about relationships. When you're thinking about making someone your friend, you're not just going, hey, do their friendships end in disasters? Do their friendships end in a certain number of years? We want to pluck the log out of our own eye and be like, hey, is this true of me? Do all my friendships end in disasters? Do all my friendships just implode in our big drama cesspool? Or do my friendships end well and we just drift apart? And what's my longest lasting friendship? Where is my oldest friend? And are we still in contact? Or why do all my friendships seem to last a few years? These are kind of the questions that we are going to be looking at when we are talking about best friendship. And so I don't know if that's a word, best friendship. Is that a word? It's a word now. Add it to the dictionary. And so when we get married, we often times have this lens of, hey, man, I'm going to look at the friendship, do the resume check of, hey, how long have you been friends with the people you're friends with? Only a couple months. What's up with that? And we do that when it comes to marriage, when it comes to dating someone, but we don't do that when it comes to our friendships with one another. Very rarely do we become friends with someone and start investigating, hey, how long do your friendships last? And I think we should get back to that, and we need to examine why our friendships end and why they don't end. And then another thing we need to look at is flags in relationships. How many of you guys have heard of that's a flag in a relationship? Okay, so in case a lot of you don't know what this is, so let me enlighten you. Green flag means good. Yellow flag means cautionary. And red flag means break up immediately. That's some toxic behavior. And so those are the flag systems. So now you guys are caught up to speed. I don't know how you guys have gone through life without knowing the flag system. And so when we are looking at friendships, and especially people with their friendships, we need to be asking the question, what flag are they? When their friendships end, is that when they end disastrously, is that a yellow flag or is that a red flag? You need to decide that and figure out how important that is. And then we also need to ask the question, because we so often we project onto other people. We go, man, like, I do this all the time with my friends who start dating, and they're like, tell me something that's really easy for me because I have no emotions invested in the relationship. I'm like, yeah, dude, that's a red flag, dude. You need to get out of there. But very rarely do we're quickly to call flags out in other people, but are we ever calling flags out in our own life? Very rarely. And so as we go through this talk, and especially as we go through this relationship series, we don't just want to be looking, hey, what about the people over there? What about the people who are not in this room? Or often when we hear messages like this, we go, man, so-and-so needs to hear this. But really this message is for ourselves, and we need to be asking ourselves, hey, do I have some bad friendships? Do I have some yellow flags or red flags in my life that I need to address? And so let's dive into best friendship. A good example of best friends is Jesus. Do you guys know who Jesus is? He's a first century rabbi in Israel. Big deal. Dedicated my whole life to him. So the Bible is full of friendships. Jesus kind of had, he did have best friends, okay? I hate to break the news to you. Jesus had best friends. I don't have a proof text for that. I don't have 1 John chapter 5, and Jesus' best friends were, but what we can infer from Jesus and his friendships was we know that he had disciples. He had the 12 disciples. We all know that. We learned that in Sunday school. He had 12 disciples, and if anybody can name them off the top of the head, you get a candy bar. But most of the time, we can't name all 12 of them, but we know the big names, and the big names are the ones that Jesus were the closest to. So Jesus had his big circle of his 12 disciples, then he had his inner circle, and every scholar will agree that Jesus had this inner circle, and the inner circle consisted of Peter and James and John. These were Jesus's homeboys. This is the ones that we have all heard about. We know Peter, he's the rock, he's the Petra, you are the Christ. He has a lot of famous stories in the Bible. James and John also have a lot of famous stories in the Bible, and so we know these guys. And so what I want to do is look at a few of these stories and apply some principles from these stories of Jesus, James, and John, and Peter, and be like, hey, what can we take away from this? And so Peter, James, and John. We'll go through three stories. The first story is the Mount of Transfigurations. How many of you guys have heard of this story? Anybody familiar with this story? Okay, so quick recap. It's in Luke 9, 28 through 36. So if you're taking notes, you can take that note. We're not going to read the whole passage, but basically I'll do a summary. Basically, Jesus is getting ready to go to Jerusalem. He takes Peter, James, and John. They go to the Mount of Transfiguration, and two guys appear up on the Mount of Transfiguration. The guys are Moses and Elijah. And so I don't know about you, but if I'm like going for a hike and then I get to the top of the hike and it's like, oh, what up? It's Moses and Elijah. I'm going, this is not no more Saturday. This is kind of a fluke thing. And so obviously this is a crazy moment for all of them. And so now, I love this in verse 32 of Luke chapter 9. Now Peter and those who were with him were heavy with sleep. But as they went, as when they became fully awake, they saw the glory of the two men and stood with him. And as the men were parting from him, Peter said to Jesus, Master, it is good that we are here. Let us make tents, one of you and one for Moses and one for Elijah. And so the principle I want to apply to the Mount of Transfiguration is there's a lot of things going on, and we can send a whole message talking about what is going on at the Mount Transfigurations. But the one thing I want to focus on is oftentimes Peter, James, and John, they get a bad rap. They're oftentimes like the butt of every joke. But one thing that happens here is Peter's a good sleeper. He borderline has narcolepsy. He is sleeping a lot throughout the Gospels. But so he wakes up and he sees Moses and Elijah walking away, and he goes, hey, Jesus, I got a great idea. I'll make you guys tents. And so the principle here is best friends serve one another. And so Jesus served his disciples, but we see right here, Peter, James, and John, they were down to serve Jesus. That they're like, hey, dude, you're meeting some heroes of the Old Testament. We're going to serve you, and we're going to try to make this a special moment for you. And so they were like, hey, Master, we're going to build you some tents. And so the principle to that story is best friends. One, they share special moments together. Think about your friendships and why they're so rich. It's because sometimes you go through some traumatic incidences together, whether that be funny or just bad or like absolutely traumatizing, or it's like, man, that moment was a special and sacred moment, and that bonds you for life. And so friends have good moments and experiences together, and we'll see this throughout these three stories. But point number one, they serve your friends. Peter served Jesus on the Mount of Transfigurations. Next story, a Samaritan village rejects Jesus. This is coming in Luke 51 through 56. And so it's coming right after the story of Transfiguration. So it's just an impactful week for the followers of Jesus during this time. And so the story goes at the Samaritan village where they reject Jesus is Jesus preaches the gospel, he does things, and the people reject him. And so it'd be like if I preached the message here and then you guys went, boo, you suck, and you gave me like a 36% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I'm just like feeling horrible about myself, and nobody comes forward to follow Jesus. I'm just feeling horrible about myself. And so what James and John say, this is one of the funniest things I find in the Bible, and it's also probably pretty dark humor. So in Luke chapter 9, verse 54, he says, and when his disciples, James and John, saw it, they said, Lord, do you want us to call fire down from heaven and consume them? And so their response to, hey, people not following Jesus, not accepting the works of Jesus is like, hey, not like, hey, Jesus, do you want to call fire down from heaven? No, look at the wording. The wording in there is, do you want us to call down fire from heaven? Like the audacity of that claim. Like, hey, Jesus, I know, like you're gonna die on the cross. You love people and everything, but I know these people suck. And we all can recognize that. So this is what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to burn the village for you. You down, Jesus? And, it's like, and even better than that, we're not just going to do arsenic. I'm going to call it down from heaven like I'm Elijah. That's what I'm going to do. And so I just love the sense of humor for that. But we can make a joke about that. But the point is that your friends always have your back. I mean, like how many times have you been in a sticky situation and your friend just comes to the rescue and you're like, man, thanks, man. Whether that be like, hey, my phone is about about to die and I need a phone charger, and your friend comes to the rescue. You're like, oh my goodness, thanks, dude. It's not coming down fire from heaven, but it's pretty darn close. Or like, hey man, my car broke down and I need to change the tire real quick. Or I ran into some old people in a parking lot and I can't unstuck their tire, but I have a buddy who can, so I'm gonna call him and he's gonna have my back and bring me to the rescue and make me look real good in front of some old people from Canada. True story, shout out Aiden. And so your friends always have your back. And so when we're looking at best friends, do your friends have your back? And if you call them at a moment's notice, are they dropping everything and doing what you want them or need them to do? And then the next story is when Jesus is going to the cross. Right before he goes to the cross, in Matthew 26, verse 36 to 46, Jesus, he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane. It's a famous story. And he brings Peter, James, and John with him, and he prays. And so they go with Jesus to pray with him. And it says here in verse 35 to 37, then Jesus went with them to the place of the Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, sit here while I go over there and pray. And take with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee. And he began to be sorrowful and troubled. And so I'm going to stop right there. But the thing I want to point out is, man, Jesus was sorrowful and troubled. And who did he pick to bring with him? Peter, James, and John. So your friends are with you in the hard times. When you're going through a season of severe difficulty, you're not going to call your casual friends that you get together with game night. You're going to get together with those friends who truly know you and you don't feel like you have to entertain. You're going to call those friends that you're like, hey, you want to come over and hang out? And they come over and hang out. And what do? You don't talk the whole time. You're still just watching YouTube videos on your phone, and you're just chilling, doing life as normal, or you're folding laundry. Those are your best friends. And so Jesus calls his best friends, and they're there with him in the hard times. And now people love to beat up on them, and he's like, yeah, they fell asleep. I'm like, yeah, wouldn't you fall asleep too? It's like middle of the night and Jesus is having an anxiety attack. You're like, hey bro, I'm not the one. And they don't understand the situation, but they were still there with Jesus. And so be there for your friends in the hard times. And this is a thing that we can look at in ourselves of going, hey, are these things true in my life? Am I there for my friends in the hard times? Do I have my friends' backs? Am I the one serving my friends? And then also, is this true of my friends? Because if this isn't true of your friends, you need to get some new friends. That's just the bottom line. You need to get some friends who will serve you, that will have your back and sit with you in the hard times. And so that is best friendship. And so that can apply to you dating someone. These should be qualities you're looking for in someone you're dating, that you're thinking about getting married to. And this should also be qualities in someone you're just going to do life with, whether that be someone here at Harvest, or whether that be someone at church, or whether someone outside the church. Man, you should still look for these qualities in that person. And so that leads us on to our next B. So B1 is done. And now it's on to B2, and that is boundaries. And so we're down with best friends. Now, what is boundaries? And so when we're talking about boundaries, we're talking about boundaries in relationships. And so simply put, boundaries is property line. Henry Cloud, he has a book called Boundaries. He kind of has made a whole market on it. He has like boundaries in dating, boundaries in marriage, boundaries in business. He's labeled every book he's written boundaries. It's fantastic marketing. But in his book Boundaries, he defines boundaries as property lines. And so boundaries are a good thing, not a bad thing. And so oftentimes when it gets into relationships, we view boundaries as a bad thing. We want people to know us, to understand us, and we go, man, boundaries are not a good thing when it comes to relationships, versus boundaries are good in every other context. Like, it's good that this building has boundaries. It's good that there's walls there, so that way we are in semi-climate controlled environment. It's a good thing that the grass ends when it ends. There's a good thing that the road ends when it ends. It's a good thing that there's not just a parking lot forever and that we can just drive whatever direction there is. It's a good thing that there's speed limits. There's a good thing that on some hills there's speed bumps, so that way people don't go launching over hills. Limits are a good thing. And then we can look at nature and see the beautiful limiting factor of nature. You can look at like a golf course or like a pretty garden or like something like that, and you can look at the ocean and see the boundaries are a beautiful and good thing. So boundaries are a good thing. And so when looking about our relationships, is especially in the context of dating, we got to look at boundaries. And so when we are dating someone, no matter what stage you are in dating someone, you are two flesh, not one. And so the whole point of marriage is that you are two becoming one flesh. And so the key there in marriage is that you are two becoming one flesh. And so when you are dating, you are not one flesh. And so when dating relationships get dangerous is when it becomes like a marriage. And I've said this a couple weeks ago, but I'll remind you guys and say it again, that really where relationships and dating relationships and any relationship gets toxic is when we apply two principles that are meant for marriage into our dating or into our friendships. And those two things are covenant, meaning covenant is, hey, no matter what you do, I'm going to fulfill my end of the agreement. It's not a contract. Contract says, if you do these things, I'm free to do whatever I want. Marriage is a covenant, meaning whatever you do, if you go off and do whatever, I'm still going to remain faithful to you. That is covenant. And so that's where dating relationships get really toxic, is when someone starts manipulating their relationship to make it be a covenant. Like, hey, you can't leave me. You better not leave me. And so when that starts happening in a dating relationship, that's when things start to get weird and it starts to get toxic. We all have those friends who've been in those dating relationships and we've seen it, or maybe some of you have been in those relationships where it starts to get really toxic and really nasty, and you're going, man, and the guy or the girl is going, man, I can't leave. I'm terrified to leave. What if something happens? And so that's where things go awry. Another way that dating relationships go awry is when we try to make the two flesh relationship into a one flesh relationship. And that is everything from sexual intimacy to bearing everything. And so actually in psychology, there's this thing called trauma bonding, where basically you unload all your trauma onto someone and then you feel a kinetic closeness to them because you shared every intimate detail about your life. And then if they do the same thing, then you basically, it's called trauma bonding. Or like if you're watching Instagram Reels, it's like, this is like if you ever had like a really bad job. Anybody ever had like a really bad job? And then some of you are like, I don't want to raise my hand because it's like I'm at that job right now. But like I've had some like awful toxic jobs, and like me and those people who had those jobs together, I mean, like when I see them, I'm like, we're like best friends again because we went through a traumatic experience together. But dating relationships get really nasty when we start to make the one flesh relationship into our dating relationship. And so we need to keep our dating relationship as two separate beings. You are still an individual when you are dating someone. You don't just morph and become like that person. I don't know about you guys, but I had like some friends in high school that whenever they would date someone, their whole personality, their whole ethos would change. Anybody know this person? Like I had like one buddy, he was like kind of like a straight edge guy, and then all of a sudden like he started dating like an emo girl, and then all of a sudden he's like shopping at Hot Topic. He like got lip rings, and I'm like, dude, what's happening? He's like, I don't know, dude. And I'm like, dude, I swear you're changing who you are to be with this girl. Like it was crazy. And then I had another buddy he was just like a normal dude, and then all of a sudden he starts dating this girl on the volleyball team, and all of a sudden he's like, yeah, dude, I think I'm gonna play football next year. He's like, he all of a sudden just goes, I'm gonna become a whole jock. That becomes his whole personality. We all know those people who, when they start dating someone, they just morph and change into that person of whoever they want them to be. A girl starts dating a guy who plays video games. All of a sudden, she's a video game girl. Or the guy, hey, I'm going to be whatever this girl wants me to be, or whatever this guy wants me to be. And so it's important in dating relationships that we keep our individual selves, that you keep your values, your preferences, and your morals still intact. Henry Cloud says this in his book, Boundaries in Dating. When you are clear about your values, preferences, and morals, you solve many problems before they start. And so you got to be really clear about your values and your preferences before you even step into a dating relationship. And so what this looks like, your values, one is religion. I want to raise my kids as Christian. I'm sold on that. That was a deal breaker for me. I'm not going to date someone who doesn't want to raise their kid in the church. My kids are going to be raised in the church. That's a deal breaker for me. I'm not going to date anybody who doesn't have the same value as me. Another value for me that I had when I was a single person was I'm going to marry someone who values family, who wants a good, healthy family. I want the grandparents, the aunts and uncles being involved in my kids' life. I'm not going to compromise on that. We're going to have family traditions. I'm going to keep family values a core to my child's growing up, and that's what the kind of family I want to raise. I'm not going to compromise on that. I had those values, and luckily for me, my wife had the same values, and it brought us closer together. And then the category of preferences. These would be more trivial things, not heavier things, but more trivial things. Like for me, it was a deal breaker for my spouse to be a big fan of Harry Potter. Like I'm like, for me, if you're not into Harry Potter, I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with you. I gotta pray for your soul, and I understand you're dealing with some conservative childhood trauma. I was there. I can get you out of it. But luckily for me, Mary, were you a fan of Harry Potter when we started dating? Okay, yeah. But we're big fans of Harry Potter now. And so for me, that was a preference. And also for me, a big preference thing was she has to be a fan of Lord of the Rings. And so I got her to watch the movies of Lord of the Rings, and it was the whole classic dating thing where you're like, hey, you got to watch this movie. And like you're having them watch the movie, they're watching the movie, and you're like watching them, and you're going, okay, this is a big scene. I want to know what their reaction's like. And Mary's like, stop watching me, watch the show. I'm like, oh yeah, I am. And I'm like, please like it, please like it. And so that would be a preference thing. That's not that big of a deal, but still those things make up who you are. Those aren't little things. And so if you don't have common interests, I mean, what the relationship, you don't have fun things to do. And so the last category is morals. And now this really comes down to character. What kind of person are you going to marry? Are you going to marry someone with integrity? And now integrity just means someone whose yes means yes and no means no. And so are you going to marry someone who's like, oh yeah, I'll do that, and then they don't do that? Or are you going to marry someone who can compromise their morals willy-nilly? Are you going to marry someone who's a compulsive liar? Are you going to marry someone who's honest? Are you going to marry someone who just treats people like absolute crap? Or are you going to marry someone who treats others well? And so these are the kind of things that you got to think about when you're dating, when you're stepping into a dating relationship, and even when you're becoming friends with someone. Because I had a buddy in high school who I thought he was the coolest dude ever. Like he was a professional skateboarder while we were in high school, and I'm like, dude, I'm gonna be best friends with this dude. He has a sponsorship with Volcom, dude. I want to be friends with this dude, and he has a skate park in his barn. And so I found myself going, man, I'll just mold myself into this person. I'll be whoever they want me to be, and then come to find out that, man, he liked me for me. I didn't need to pretend to be anybody else. I just had to be me, and he was completely okay with me. And so this doesn't just apply to a dating relationship. This also applies to your friendships. If you're trying to win someone over as your friend by compromising who you are, man, they're not going to like you for who you are. They're liking a fake version of you. So be honest with yourself. And so, because if the God of the universe likes you for you, I don't think I'm not too impressed with anybody in popular culture who's more impressive than God. And so if God likes you for you, I think you is okay. And so this leads to the last B, the breakups. And so this one comes with all kinds of baggage. And so now, I have been through a few breakups myself. I consider myself an expert. I've had my 10,000 hours in breakups. No, not really. Yeah, dramatic water break. My wife, luckily, she has never been through a breakup, and never will. So take that, devil. All right, so the two things that we experience the most when a breakup happens, the two emotions and luckily for me, I get to walk with so many people through breakups just because I have a lot of friends, because I'm really popular and really well liked. That's why I have a lot of friends. No, but just because of my job, I get to walk with a lot of people through breakups. And the two emotions I see most often in people when going through a breakup are, one, rejection. Rejection just feels so strong during a breakup. And the other emotion is just utter confusion. What happened? How did this happen? Why did this happen? Why would this person reject me? Those are the two things I see most often in a breakup. And so if you have been through a breakup, you have experienced these two emotions. So you've been rejected, so was Jesus. Jesus was rejected. He was created to be the savior to Israel. You weren't even created to be the savior to that significant person, and yet Jesus was still rejected. You thought you were perfect for this person? Jesus was perfectly made to be the savior of Israel, and yet they still rejected him. And so and I say all that not just to be like, hey man, it's all about Jesus, but Jesus understands the pain of rejection. I mean, Hebrews 4:15 says, for we do not have a high priest, this is speaking of Jesus, who's unable to sympathize with our weakness, but one who's in every aspect been tempted as we are tempted, yet without sin. And so Jesus knows exactly what it's like to be rejected. You thought you loved that person. You thought you saw a future with that person. Jesus is still created to be the savior of Israel. He's still coming back. He's not done with those people, but yet they still rejected him. Yet we still rejected him. Yet we still put him on the cross. Jesus understands rejection. And so when you're going through a breakup, Romans 5 talks about this. James talks about this. This is not a season to run away from God. This is a season to press into God. Man, God, why am I feeling so rejected? Why is my identity so much in what other people think about me? Walk with Jesus through that season. And so how it looks to walk with Jesus through the season of rejection is just bearing your soul to Jesus. First one is just be super honest with Jesus. For me, this happens in car drives. I go for a car drive and I'm just, sometimes I have music cranked and sometimes I don't have any music on, and I'm just really blunt and honest with God in the car. So being really honest with your vulnerability with God. And the other thing is getting into the word and going, man, what does Jesus say about me? Man, what does Jesus say about rejection? Man, how did Jesus handle rejection? What did he do in rejection? Getting into the word and I'm going to know what God says about this very moment. So those are two ways within the season of rejection that you can press into God, that this is a season to double down into your relationship with God. And it doesn't just apply to a dating breakup. It also applies to friendships. Some of you've been hurt and you've been scarred by friendships end sometimes for good, healthy reasons. Sometimes it's drifting apart, and sometimes they end badly. That it just is terrible, and you experience rejection in this avenue. And we can still push into the reality that Jesus was rejected, and he knows what it's like. The other emotion is confusion. Sometimes breakups come out of the blue, but and we're just utterly confused. If the breakup is a long time coming and we get the closure and everything, oftentimes it's still confusing, no matter what kind of breakup you go through, whether it's one out of the blue, anybody following the Zach Bryan, Brianna chicken fried drama? Nobody? Okay. I'm a huge Zach Bryan fan, but I'm with Brie on this one. I'm confused. I thought they were a match made in heaven, but I'm really excited for that new song. I can tell you that much. But some of us are come out of breakups and we're just like so confused about what happened and everything like that. And so I want to end practically with how do you go about it? And so when a breakup ends in a confusing way, which honestly most of the time it ends in a confusing way, as followers of Jesus, I encourage you guys to do one thing, and that is to have the breakup conversation. And so if you are thinking about breaking up with someone, break up with them, give it a few days, few weeks, and then have the breakup conversation. And two things to walk into this breakup conversation with humility and honesty. Those are the two things I highly recommend walking into the breakup conversation, is walk in going, hey man, whatever they say, I'm going to take it on the chin, and I'm going to be really honest with them. I'm going to say, hey, nothing's wrong. I'm not going to do the cliche, hey, it's not you, it's me. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be honest of why this relationship ends. It's going to hurt. It's going to be painful for you. It's going to be painful for them, but it's going to be ultimately for the benefit of both of you guys. And so that conversation needs to take place. But the only way I say not to have this conversation, the breakup conversation, is if there's in any way there was abuse in the relationship, if there was any sense of sexual abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, if there's any abuse at all in the relationship and it ends, do not have the breakup conversation. Do not have the breakup conversation. Just get out of that, cut your losses. You did nothing. There's nothing really to be taken away from that, and the confusion should not be there because you should have ran away from that person a long time ago. They did not love you well, and so you did not deserve that pain. You did not invite that into your life, and so you just walk away from that relationship entirely. Get some friends around you. Rally your troops around you, and get in that season of love if that is you. But also with the breakup conversation is do it in a public place. So I say that for two reasons. One, you don't get angry and pissed off in the conversation and things like don't escalate too high or too quickly. And the other reason, I'm just gonna be blunt, makeup sex. If you're doing it in public, if you're doing it in a bedroom, man, the emotions are high. Compromise is really likely there because you want to make things right. Most of us are people pleasers, so we want the person to be happy, and so we'll do the breakup sex thing. And so do it in a public place, do it at somewhere like Boulevard, do it somewhere where no funny business can be had, and also do it in a place so that way if things get heightened, people get angry, people get hurt, you can still have it in a public place. And you're like, hang on, Andrew, I can't do it in a public place because I'm gonna cry. I hate to break it to you, but most people don't really care about what's going on around them. If you go to the park, tell me the last time you really watched someone. You don't. The closest we get to people watching is probably at restaurants. Most of the time when we're at the park, you either have a podcast in, you're walking, you're going, man, this is so good, or you're at the park with some friends and maybe you pick up bits and pieces, but you're not getting the whole story. And most of the time, if someone sees someone crying in the park, they're not gonna double down and stare at them. They're not gonna go, oh, that person's crying, and just stare at them like deadpan. They're not gonna do that. It's not gonna happen. So you can do it in a public place. My spot was Racehorse Falls, so feel free to do that. And so do the breakup, be honest, be vulnerable with them, be transparent with them. Don't say, hey, I'm breaking up with you because it's me, not you. Be honest with why you're breaking up with them. And then when they bring up things against you, be humble about it. Don't go, hey, whoa, no, you're getting things wrong. Don't treat it like a debate, like you're a lawyer arguing in a courtroom, like you're on an episode of Suits, and you're going whole Mike Ross on it. And you go, actually, Article 5A says, and you're going, don't do that. Go, okay, I can see where you're coming from, and seek to understand, meaning asking questions like, hey, what do you mean by that? When you said that I was narcissistic in my behavior, can you give me examples? And it's not accusatory. It's going, hey, I'm trying to be humble. I'm trying to understand. So that way in my next relationship, I'm not bringing this baggage into it. And so I want to end, worship team, you guys can come on up. I want to end very simply with three things. I added one to it. I want to end with three things. And so three things to take away. If you're looking at best friends, breakups, and all these, and boundaries and everything, I want to highlight three things for all three of these things. One, honesty. If you're going to be best friends with someone, they need to be honest. If you're going to date someone, they need to be honest. If you're going to break up with someone, you need honesty there. Honesty is one of the great characteristics. And if we look at the life of Jesus, man, I don't know about you, but I would definitely describe Jesus as an honest man. And so not only is it part of following Jesus and looking at Jesus, but it's also just good behavior to look into for other people. So if you're going to be best friends with someone, one, be honest with them. Make sure they're honest with you. If you're going to date someone, make sure you're honest with them and they're honest with you. And if you're going through a breakup with someone, make sure they are honest with you and you're honest with them. The second one is humility. Jesus was God who put on human flesh, who humbled himself to the point of death, even death on a cross. And so Jesus lived a life of humility. And so we are called to be humble as well. And so when we're looking for friendships, nobody wants to be friends with the arrogant person. Nobody wants to date the arrogant person. So we need to put on humility. We need to look at others. We all love the friend who serves us, who treats us well. And so look for that in your friendships, but also be that friend to other people. And third thing and last thing about best friends, boundaries, and breakups is trustworthy. We got to look at these people. Is this someone that I can trust? And man, if you're going to be best friends with someone, is this someone I can be, that I can trust? Can I trust them with my inner thoughts? Can I trust them with my inner desires? Can I trust them? If I'm going to date someone, can I trust them? And also with the boundary piece, man, what do I trust them with at what time? And having that conversation of, hey, man, is this too much too soon? Because as you're dating someone, you're moving into the place of trust. You don't just, hey, we're dating now I fully trust you. At least you shouldn't be there. You should be like, hey, we're dating. I'm trying to figure out if you're someone to be trustworthy. Because in a marriage, man, you need trust. And in a friendship that's going to last decades, you need good trustworthiness to happen. And we know that God is trustworthy. One of the things that fascinates me the most about God is how trustworthy God is. We can say trustworthy, we can say faithfulness, but really what it comes down to is when God says something, we can count on him to deliver it. In the Old Testament, it gives all these prophecies of Jesus coming to earth, of what he's gonna do. And then in the Gospels, if you can look it up, the word fulfilled, meaning that he fulfilled these prophecies, is used 21 times throughout the Gospels. And so if God says he's gonna do something, he's gonna do it. And so we can trust in Jesus. We can put our trust in Jesus because we know that he had fulfilled that in Jesus, that Jesus didn't come to abolish the law, but he came to fulfill the law. And so Jesus is the fulfillment of God's trustworthiness. Man, we can trust God because look at the life of Jesus. God has, and even look at your own life. Look at what God has done in your own life. You don't need to look very far to see how trustworthy God has been. And maybe you're in the season where God's called you into something and you haven't seen that come to fruition. That's called being faithful. You're going, hey, I trust God. I'm gonna live in this tension of not seeing the fulfilled promise yet, but it's gonna come to be. And Jesus is still gonna fulfill his promise of restoring the new heavens and the new earth. He's gonna restore the promise of wiping away every tear, where there is no more sorrow, where there is no more grieving. That day is coming in. We can trust upon that because we know that God has already fulfilled so much of what he's already said he was gonna do. And so with that, why don't we stand and we're gonna close out with some worship. Dear Jesus, we praise you. We thank you that you are trustworthy. We praise you. We think that we can put all of our trust, God, in you. God, we praise you. We thank you so much for your word. God, that in a day and in an age where there's chaos, where we don't know what to believe, we don't know if people are saying the truth, God, we don't know what news media to believe, what we heard on TikTok is true, God, we can trust on the word, God. We know that it is true and trustworthy because it is your word, God. So we just rely on you, God. We put all of our faith, all of our trust in you, God. We pray just for our relationships, God. I pray for each person here, God. I pray for their friendships, God. I pray that if there's some friendships that need to end, God, that you would highlight this to them. God, I pray right now, God, that if they're being a toxic friend, God, I pray that you would highlight it. God, I pray that we'd be friends that look like you, God, that we'd be friends who are honest, humble, and trustworthy, God. So I just pray, God, that you just bless our friendships, God, that we'd be those friends that we'd so want and so desire, and that we'd have those friends that we so want and so desire, God. So I pray you be over all of our relationships, all of our future relationships, God. I pray you just bless them in your name. Amen.
He